They told us our enemy was the Japanese Empire. They were wrong. Oh, the Japanese were there, all right. Make no mistake. They were dug into those islands like ticks, fierce and disciplined soldiers, but they were just another predator in the food chain. The real enemy, the one that wanted us dead from the moment our boots sank into the black sand of the beach, was the jungle itself. It wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing thing, and it hated us with a cold, ancient malice that no human army could ever muster. My name is Samuel Miller. I was a sergeant with the 1st Marine Division, 2nd Raider Battalion in the summer of 1943. Our job was to go where the regular infantry couldn't, to be ghosts, to see without being seen and report back what we found. We'd already been through the meat grinder of Guadalcanal. We thought we'd seen the worst war had to offer. We were children, we had no idea. The island was called Le Talo, a name that meant nothing to most, just a speck on a naval chart in some admiral's warm, dry cabin. But for us, it was the next circle of hell. Intelligence suggested the Japanese were building a new airfield there, a potential dagger aimed at our supply lines. Our mission was simple on paper: infiltrate, confirm the airfield's existence and location, mark any anti-aircraft positions, and exfiltrate. A 4-day mission, they said. In and out. We were inserted by rubber boat on a moonless night, the kind of darkness that feels solid, like you could reach out and touch it. The sea was calm, warm, and black as oil. We paddled in absolute silence. The only sounds, the gentle slosh of water against the rubber hull and the ragged rhythm of our own breathing. We made it to the beach without a single shot being fired. We dragged the boats into the tree line, camouflaged them, and allowed ourselves a moment of quiet relief. We thought that was a good sign. It was the first lie the jungle told us. The jungle began just 20 yards from the waterline. It wasn't a gradual thing. It was a wall, a solid, impenetrable wall of green that seemed to swallow the very sound of the ocean the moment we stepped past the first giant ferns. The air changed instantly. The clean, salty sea breeze was gone, replaced by a thick, wet heat that clung to your skin. It was heavy with the cloying smell of blooming flowers, undercut by the deep, rotten stench of decaying vegetation and things I didn't have a name for. It was like trying to breathe hot soup. Our team was 6 men. Me, Sergeant Samuel Miller, the old man at 25. My second was Corporal James Jimmy Russo, a sharp-eyed kid from Brooklyn who could talk a mile a minute when he was nervous, which was why he'd learned to be so quiet. Then there were the PFCs. David Chen, our scout, quiet and impossibly graceful, who moved through vegetation like it parted for him. Thomas Big Tom O'Reilly, a gentle giant from Chicago who carried the heavy radio like it was a toy. William Hendricks, a farm boy from Iowa who had a preternatural sense for danger. And Robert Doc Vance, our medic, a man who carried a Bible and believed in saving lives even out here. We stood at the edge of that green wall for a long moment, just listening. The jungle wasn't silent. It was a cacophony of clicks, buzzes, screeches, and rustles. A million unseen lives going about their business. It was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. I looked at the faces of my men, pale and grim in the faint green light filtering down from the canopy. I gave the signal, and we stepped inside. The jungle closed around us immediately. The light faded to a dull, oppressive gloom. We were in a perpetual, tangled twilight. Our mission had begun, and with every step deeper into that hungry green darkness, I felt a cold certainty growing in my gut. We weren't just soldiers on a mission. We were trespassers. The first 100 yards into the jungle took us nearly an hour. It wasn't a walk. It was a fight. Every step was a battle against the land itself. Thick, rubbery vines snaked across the barely visible game trails we tried to follow, grabbing at our ankles like bony fingers. Thorns from plants I couldn't name reached out and ripped at our uniforms and skin. The air was so saturated with moisture that our uniforms were soaked through with sweat within minutes, clinging to us like a second, heavier skin. The heat was a physical weight on our shoulders. It pressed down, sapping our strength before we'd even gone a mile. The canopy above was so dense that the sun was just a memory, a faint green-tinged glow far above us. We moved in a perpetual, sticky twilight. The only sounds were our own labored breathing, The squelch of mud under our boots and the constant deafening buzz of insects. They found us immediately. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds, their whine a constant irritation. You'd breathe them in, feel them crawling in your hair, on your neck. There was no swatting them all away. Chen was on point, as always. He was a ghost. You'd blink and he'd be 10 feet ahead, having moved without making a sound. He'd stop, hold up a closed fist, and we'd all freeze, hearts pounding. He'd listen, his head tilted, then signal all clear with a slow wave of his hand. We'd move again. Stop, listen, move. It was a slow, nerve-wracking dance. Big Tom O'Reilly, carrying the heavy radio on his back, was struggling. The humidity was worse for him, the extra weight a brutal burden. I could hear his ragged breaths behind me. "This is worse than Canal, Sarge," he muttered, wiping sweat from his eyes with a grimy sleeve. "This place, it feels different." He was right. Guadalcanal had been brutal, but it felt like a battle against men. This felt like a battle against the earth. The jungle was ancient, and we were nothing to it. A temporary irritation. Around midday, we found the first concrete sign we weren't alone. Chen held up his fist again, but this time the signal was different. He pointed down. There, half buried in the mud, was a discarded Japanese ration tin. It was rusted, picked clean by ants. Hendricks, the farm boy, knelt down, poking it with a stick. "Old," he said, his voice low. "Weeks, maybe months. Rained on a lot." It was a small thing, but it tightened the coil in my gut. They had been here. They might still be here. We moved on even more cautiously now. The jungle seemed to watch us. We'd passed giant, twisted banyan trees whose roots looked like grasping claws. Strange, colorful fungi grew on rotting logs, looking like something from a nightmare. Once, a deafening screech echoed from the canopy directly above us, and we all dropped to a knee. Rifles pointed up, only to see a flash of red and blue feathers as a parrot took off. Our nerves were frayed wires. We made camp that first night in a small, relatively clear spot beneath the roots of a massive tree. We didn't dare set up proper tents or light a fire. The smoke would be a beacon. We just slumped on the ground, backs against the tree, eating cold rations from our packs. The darkness that fell was absolute, a blackness you could feel. The sounds of the day insects were replaced by a new symphony of clicks, chirps, and deep guttural croaks from the darkness. No one slept much. You'd close your eyes and feel things crawling on you. Every rustle in the leaves was a Japanese patrol. Every snap of a twig was a bayonet charging. Hendricks swore he saw pairs of eyes reflecting back from the jungle just beyond our perimeter. Small, close to the ground. Wild pigs, maybe, or something else. The next morning, we were moving before the sun could even think about penetrating the canopy. We were stiff, sore, and covered in insect bites. But we had a job to do. Chen scouted ahead and returned with a grim look on his face. "Found a trail," he whispered. "Wider than an animal trail, recently used. Boot prints." This was it. We were getting close. We followed him, our senses screaming. The trail led upwards to a ridge that overlooked a large, cleared area in the jungle below. We crawled the last few yards on our bellies, pushing through the ferns until we had a view. And there it was, the airfield. It was still under construction, a raw scar of red earth slashed into the green. We could see 2 bulldozers, silent and still like metal beetles. Figures in khaki uniforms moved around, ant-like, from this distance. On the north and south perimeters, we could make out the distinctive shapes of anti-aircraft gun emplacements. Intel was right. Big Tom carefully unslung the radio. This was the moment. He extended the antenna, his hands moving with practiced ease. He keyed the handset, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Base, this is Stalker Actual. Objective confirmed. Repeat. Objective confirmed. We count 2 bulldozers, maybe 100 personnel. Light AA positions on the north and south perimeter. Over." The static, crackled response was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Roger, Stalker Actual, good copy. Stand by for extraction coordinates. Over." A wave of relief washed over me. We'd done it. We'd found it, and we were going home. That's when the first mortar shell screamed in. The first mortar round slammed into the ridge 20 yards behind us. Dirt and leaves erupted into the air, raining down like shrapnel. The blast rolled through my chest, leaving my ears ringing. We all hit the ground, pressing ourselves into the mud as if the earth could swallow us whole. "Contact!" I shouted, though none of us needed the reminder. Another round screamed overhead, detonating closer this time. Big Tom wrestled with the radio, dragging it under cover. Russo was already scanning with his binoculars. "They know we're here, Sarge," he hissed. No kidding. The jungle that had felt oppressive before now came alive with chaos. Small arms fire ripped through the foliage, blind but terrifyingly close. The Japanese weren't firing to scare us, they were bracketing us, tightening a noose. "Chen, flank left, find us a way down," I barked. He vanished into the green like smoke. Rounds cracked overhead, splintering branches. Hendricks fired back, short bursts just to keep their heads down. Doc Vance crawled over to Big Tom, checking the radio's antenna, making sure it wasn't shredded. "This isn't random," Russo muttered beside me. His voice was tight, angry. They were waiting. The thought chilled me. This wasn't some lucky patrol stumbling on us. They knew. Maybe they'd known from the moment we landed. Chen reappeared, eyes wide. "Trail, 200 yards, but it's hot." Everything was hot. Staying put was suicide. Moving meant running straight into fire. I looked at my men, mud-streaked faces, eyes bright with fear but steady. We weren't getting extracted from here. If we wanted to live, we had to cut our own path. "On me," I ordered. We moved low, hunched, slipping through the undergrowth. The jungle, already suffocating, now felt like it was actively fighting us. Branches clawed at our rifles, roots snagged our boots. Every step felt like it shouted our presence. Mortars continued to pound the ridge, chasing us, shepherding us downhill. We stumbled, slid, clawed our way through the muck. Russo cursed under his breath. Hendricks muttered prayers. Doc kept one hand on his medical bag as if ready for the inevitable. Then the gunfire stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. My instincts screamed. The jungle wasn't quiet because the enemy had quit. It was quiet because they were waiting. We broke into a clearing, a small one choked with tall elephant grass. Chen raised a fist to halt us. His eyes scanned the tree line. I could see it too now. Shadows moving where they shouldn't. A shimmer of light off steel. "Ambush!" I yelled, too late. The grass erupted with gunfire. Bullets hissed past, slapping into the mud. O'Reilly went down, the radio crashing beside him. He screamed, clutching his leg, blood spraying bright against the green. Doc was on him instantly, dragging him back, hands already pressing on the wound. We dove for cover, returning fire. Russo's Thompson spat flames. Chen dropped 2 men with precise, controlled shots. Hendricks kept laying down bursts, buying us seconds. I crawled to Big Tom. His face was pale, lips trembling, but he grinned through the pain. "Guess I won't be carrying that damn radio anymore, Sarge." "Shut up and stay alive," I growled, ripping a bandage from Doc's kit to tie around his thigh. Rounds cracked through the clearing, the jungle itself screaming with violence. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a trap sprung tight. And as I pressed my shoulder into the mud, firing at shadows in the trees, the realization hit me like ice. The mission was already dead. Now it was just survival. The jungle swallowed the sound of battle almost as fast as it created it. The mortar barrage shredded the ridge behind us, sending earth, leaves, and shrapnel raining down. We scrambled, crawling on our bellies, every nerve in my body screaming for cover. The anti-aircraft crews below scattered for weapons. Shouts in Japanese cut through the chaos, sharp and disciplined. This wasn't random fire, they knew exactly where we were. "Break contact into the trees," I shouted, my voice raw. We slid and tumbled down the far side of the ridge, crashing through vines and roots. The jungle closed behind us like a trap snapping shut. Russo fired short bursts over his shoulder, the muzzle flashes strobing in the gloom. Chen led us, moving like smoke, weaving us deeper into the green. But the Japanese weren't guessing anymore. They were chasing. We could hear their boots hammering the ridge, their voices barking orders. The snap of branches behind us wasn't just the jungle, it was men. Trained, armed, relentless men. Big Tom stumbled, the radio slamming against his back. Hendricks grabbed his arm, dragging him upright. "Keep moving," I barked, though my throat felt like it was full of sand. The air was thick, unbreathable. Every step sank into mud. Mosquitoes whined in clouds, biting through sweat-soaked fabric. But fear kept us running. We crashed into a gully, a narrow scar where rainwater had carved through the earth. It gave us cover, but it also boxed us in. We sloshed through knee-high mud, slipping, cursing. Chen suddenly raised a hand. We froze. He pointed ahead. There, barely 10 yards away, a Japanese scout stood on the lip of the gully. His rifle was slung, but his eyes widened as he spotted us. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then Hendricks fired. The shot echoed like a thunderclap. The scout dropped without a sound. "Go!" I snarled. There was no turning back now. The jungle had chosen sides, and it wasn't ours. We clawed our way up the opposite bank, fingers digging into wet earth, roots tearing loose under our weight. The first bullets whined past us, splintering wood, snapping vines. Russo cursed, firing blind into the trees behind us. When we finally rolled over the ridge, gasping, we found ourselves in a clearing. A wide, unnatural opening in the canopy. Sunlight stabbed down, blinding after so much gloom. For a second, it felt like freedom. Then I saw the reason for the clearing. Barbed wire. It stretched across the far side, tangled and rusted, half hidden by ferns. And behind it, sandbag bunkers. The jungle hadn't opened a door. It had funneled us straight into a kill zone. "Down!" I roared, throwing myself flat as machine guns opened up. The world turned into a hurricane of splintered wood and whizzing lead. Leaves shredded, dirt exploded, the air itself seemed to burn. Russo screamed, rolling to his side, clutching a torn shoulder. Doc crawled to him immediately, hands slick with blood as he pressed a bandage against the wound. We were pinned. Every time someone lifted their head, a burst of fire chewed the ground inches away. The enemy had us locked in, and the jungle pressed closer as if leaning in to watch. Hendricks' voice was a harsh whisper in my ear. "They're driving us. They knew where we'd be." He was right. This wasn't bad luck. This was a plan. The Japanese weren't chasing us blindly. They were herding us like animals into a pen. And in that moment, lying in the mud with my men bleeding beside me, I realized the truth. The jungle wasn't just the enemy. It was their ally. The vines that snagged our feet, the mud that slowed our steps, the canopy that hid their movement. It was all part of their weapon. We weren't just fighting soldiers, we were fighting the land itself, and the land was winning. The gunfire finally slackened, like the jungle itself had drawn a breath. Smoke hung low, drifting through shredded leaves. My men were sprawled in the mud, chests heaving, faces caked with dirt and sweat. Russo moaned softly, clutching his shoulder while Doc worked with steady, bloody hands. We had seconds, maybe less, before they swept in. "Crawl back!" I hissed. "Into the trees!" We dragged Russo between us, our knees sinking into muck, hearts hammering in unison. Every sound seemed too loud. The squelch of mud, the rasp of breathing, the metallic click of a magazine sliding into place. But somehow, miraculously, we slipped into the green wall again. The canopy swallowed us, smothering the light, hiding us in shadow. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Only the buzz of insects, the distant call of something wild. Then came the voices. Japanese. Calm, deliberate, closer than I wanted. Boots crunching over leaves, moving in formation. They weren't rushing us, they were closing a lid on a box. Hendricks' jaw was tight. "They're not letting go." "No," I whispered. "They won't stop until we're gone." Big Tom lifted the radio, the weight of it dragging at his shoulders. "We call it in now," he muttered. "Not yet," I said, though the doubt in my chest was heavy. If we gave away our position, artillery might rain down on us before it hit the enemy. The jungle wasn't wide open fields and clean targets. It was shadows and ghosts. Fire could burn us as quick as them. Chen led us down a slope, his movements sharp, precise. He was the only one who looked like he belonged here, slipping between vines, listening with his whole body. At one point he froze, holding up a fist. We stopped cold. Ahead, less than 10 paces, 2 Japanese soldiers walked by, rifles at their shoulders. We could see the sweat shining on their necks, hear the quiet murmur of their voices. They didn't know we were crouched in the undergrowth, holding our breath. Chen's hand went to his knife. I shook my head, eyes locked on his. Too risky, too loud. We waited. Long seconds dragged out like hours. Finally, the soldiers passed, their figures swallowed by the green. Only then did I let the air hiss from my lungs. But luck doesn't last in war. We rounded a bend in the gully only to hear the thump of boots ahead. Shadows moved between the trees, then the same sound behind us. "They've boxed us," Hendricks whispered. I scanned the slope. The ground was slick, the trees tangled, but there, a narrow ravine cutting sideways, half hidden by roots. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. "Down there," I motioned. We slid, half falling into the ravine. Mud coated our arms and faces, roots slashed at our uniforms. But it gave us cover. The walls rose above us, closing out the light. For a moment, it felt like we had escaped the jaws snapping behind us. Then the first grenade rolled in. "Down!" The blast tore the air apart. Dirt rained, ears rang. Russo screamed again as the concussion rattled his wound. Doc shielded him with his own body, face twisted in pain. The Japanese weren't just chasing. They were flushing us, driving us deeper. I grabbed Hendrix's arm, my voice raw. "They want us cornered. Don't give it to them. Keep moving." So we moved, slipping, scrambling, crawling through the ravine. The jungle gave no mercy. The air was thick enough to choke. Roots clawed at our legs, and every sound seemed to carry. A gun clattering, a groan of pain. Somewhere above, voices shouted, guiding each other. They knew the ground better than we did. Every step we took, they were already there. At last we spilled into another clearing. The sun cut sharp and blinding. For one instant it felt like freedom, but the sight ahead made my stomach turn cold. Pits. Dozens of them. Camouflaged with leaves, their mouths gaping open, lined with sharpened stakes. The jungle had teeth, and they were waiting for us. We had run straight into another trap. We froze at the edge of the clearing, eyes darting from pit to pit. Each one was a black mouth in the earth, lined with sharpened stakes that glistened with damp rot. They weren't dug yesterday. Some were old, filled with dark sludge and bones half submerged in mud. Others looked fresh, ready and waiting. Big Tom muttered, "Christ almighty, this ain't war, it's slaughter." The Japanese hadn't invented these traps. The jungle had. Men just learned to use its hunger. A sharp crack split the air. Rifle fire. Bark exploded from the tree next to Chen's head. Instinct took over. We scattered, diving for cover as bullets ripped across the clearing. The enemy had been waiting, perched in the tree line like hunters above a snare. I rolled into a shallow ditch, mud smearing across my face. Russo, pale and weak, tried to drag himself behind a fallen log while Doc pulled at him, cursing under his breath. Hendricks fired short bursts into the tree line, muzzle flashes blinking in the gloom. The jungle erupted with answering fire. We couldn't stay here. One wrong step and we'd tumble into those pits. "Smoke!" I barked. O'Reilly yanked a canister from his belt, yanked the pin and hurled it into the clearing. White haze boiled out, curling thick over the pits. Visibility dropped to nothing. The gunfire sputtered, then stopped. They didn't want to shoot blind either. "This way!" Chen's voice cut through the choking smoke. He'd found a narrow gap between two mounds of earth, a path half hidden by vines. We crawled through, boots slipping, hearts slamming. Behind us, I heard Japanese voices shouting, growing more frantic as the smoke spread. The trail twisted down into a low basin where water pooled black and stagnant. The stench hit first. Rot, wet animal hide. Something dead too long in the sun. Mosquitoes swarmed in a frenzy. "Goddamn swamp," Hendricks muttered, swatting at his face. It wasn't just a swamp, it was quick mud, the kind that looked solid until it sucked you under. I tested it with my boot and the ground rippled, sucking at the sole. One wrong step and we'd vanish. The voices came again, closer now. The Japanese were cautious but relentless. "We can't cross this," Doc said, shaking his head. Chen's eyes scanned the basin. Then he pointed. There, fallen logs stretched across parts of the swamp, slick with moss but firm enough to hold. Not a bridge, but a chance. We moved one by one, balancing across the logs like tightrope walkers. Every creak felt like a drumbeat. Russo was nearly limp, his good hand clawing at O'Reilly's shoulder as Tom half carried him across. Doc followed, teeth clenched, whispering prayers under his breath. I brought up the rear, rifle raised, watching the tree line. That's when the jungle struck again. A scream split the air. Hendricks! His foot slipped, plunging into the muck. In an instant, the mud swallowed up to his thigh, sucking hard. He fought, clawing at the log, face twisted in panic. "Don't move!" I hissed, rushing forward. The more he thrashed, the deeper he sank. O'Reilly lunged back, grabbing Hendricks under the arms, veins bulging as he hauled. I dropped my rifle, grabbing Hendricks' belt. The mud held fast like jaws. Above us, voices shouted, Japanese closing in. A shot cracked, splinters flying from the log inches from my hand. "Pull!" I roared. We heaved together, muscles screaming. Hendricks cried out as his boot tore free, the mud slurping shut behind it like a mouth denied a meal. We tumbled onto the log, gasping, scrambling forward as more bullets whipped past. By some miracle, we made the far side. We didn't stop. We couldn't. The jungle had taken its bite. It wanted more. We stumbled into denser cover, breath ragged, weapons slick with grime. For a brief moment, no bullets followed, no voices, just the jungle's endless chorus of buzzing, screeching, croaking. But I knew the truth. The Japanese weren't far, and the jungle wasn't finished with us yet. We didn't stop running until our lungs burned raw and our legs threatened to give out. The jungle swallowed us again, the gunfire fading into distant echoes, when at last we collapsed into a tangle of roots and ferns. Silence pressed in, broken only by the ragged wheeze of our own breathing. Russo coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made my stomach twist. He was pale as death, sweat rolling down his temples. Doc pressed his hand to Russo's chest, eyes grim. "Infection's spreading," he whispered. "If we don't get him out soon." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We were running out of time. Night came fast under the canopy. One moment it was dim green, the next it was blacker than pitch. We dared not light a fire. We sat in a rough circle, rifles across our laps, listening to the jungle come alive. The sounds were maddening. Something large crashed through the undergrowth nearby, snorting and rooting. Wild pig, maybe, or worse. Then a slow, steady drip from above, striking leaves in a rhythm like footsteps. Every crack of a branch had us snapping our heads around, fingers tightening on triggers. Hendricks whispered, "They're close. I can feel it." He wasn't wrong. Now and then, faint voices drifted through the dark, Japanese words carried on the humid air. They were hunting us. Patient. Relentless. Sleep came in scraps, moments of half-dream before some noise wrenched me back awake. Once I opened my eyes to find Chen crouched, staring into the blackness beyond. His face was carved from stone. He didn't move, didn't blink, until finally he whispered, "Eyes. Watching." We never saw them. Maybe it was monkeys, maybe not. But none of us slept again after that. The hours dragged, thick and endless. My mind wandered, twisting itself into knots. I thought of home, of wide, open fields, of air that didn't suffocate you, of the sound of silence that was truly silent. Out here, silence was a lie. Sometime deep into that endless night, Russo stirred. His hand found mine in the dark. "Sarge." His voice was faint, broken. "Promise me." I leaned close. "Save your strength, Jimmy." He shook his head weakly. "Promise me you'll tell my ma. Tell her I wasn't scared." My throat closed. I squeezed his hand hard. "You weren't scared, you hear me? Not once." He gave a faint, crooked smile. Then he drifted back into fevered dreams, mumbling words none of us could catch. The jungle pressed closer. Heat, insects, fear, all of it a constant weight. At some point, Hendricks began muttering under his breath, rocking slightly. Doc tried to calm him, but Hendricks' eyes were wide, unfocused. "It doesn't want us here," he whispered. "It's watching, waiting. It won't let us leave." O'Reilly snapped, his big voice a hiss. "Shut it, Hendricks, before they hear us." But in truth, we all felt it. The jungle wasn't just around us anymore. It was inside us, in our heads. Near dawn, the voices came again. Closer this time, clearer. Japanese patrols moving through the underbrush. Chen slipped away like a shadow, scouting their position. He returned minutes later, face grim. He traced a line in the dirt with his finger, then marked half a dozen dots. 6 men, maybe more, closing in. We couldn't outrun them, not with Russo barely conscious. We couldn't outlast them either. Ammunition was running low. Every man knew what that meant. I looked at my Marines, shadows in the weak gray of morning, exhausted, haunted, still alive. "Then we hold here," I whispered. "We make them bleed for every step. We don't let the jungle or the Japanese take us without a fight." Their eyes met mine, nods all around. The longest night was over, but the real fight was just beginning. The morning light bled weakly through the canopy, but it brought no comfort. The Japanese patrol was close, too close. Their boots snapped twigs, their voices carried through the dense undergrowth. They were sweeping for us, methodical and patient. I checked my men. Russo lay against the roots, fever burning him alive. Doc hovered close, whispering prayers under his breath. O'Reilly clutched the radio, his big hands trembling. Chen was a statue, rifle steady, eyes sharp. Hendricks muttered to himself, rocking slowly, lost somewhere between terror and madness. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were prey, cornered and bleeding. The first shots cracked through the air, muzzle flashes flaring in the green gloom. Bullets tore leaves from branches, chewed bark from trees. We fired back, controlled bursts, but every trigger squeeze felt heavier than the last. The jungle turned into a screaming chaos of gunfire, smoke, and splintered wood. I saw Chen drop one, clean and fast. Another fell screaming into the mud, but they kept coming. Shadows in khaki, their shouts echoing as they pressed in. O'Reilly cursed, hauling the heavy radio around. "Sarge, give me a line. I can call for birds." "Do it," I shouted. He keyed the handset, voice steady despite the chaos. "Base, this is Stalker Actual. We are compromised. Need immediate extraction, grid coordinates." A burst of fire ripped through the trees. O'Reilly jerked, a crimson spray blossoming across his chest. He crumpled, the radio slipping from his grasp. "No!" Hendricks screamed, unleashing a wild volley. His eyes were wide, teeth bared, like a man possessed. He didn't stop until his rifle clicked empty. By then, 3 more Japanese lay sprawled in the ferns. We dragged O'Reilly back, but one look told me there was no saving him. Doc shook his head once, eyes hollow. The fight blurred after that. Flashes of motion, the smell of cordite and blood, the cries of dying men. Somewhere in the madness, the Japanese began to pull back, maybe thinking we were stronger than we looked. Or maybe the jungle had claimed enough lives for one day. And then, silence. A heavy, smothering silence that pressed on our ears until even our own breathing felt too loud. We were alive, for now. Hours crawled by before the whine of engines reached us. PBY Catalina flying boats, circling low. We dragged Russo between us, half-carried Hendricks, and left O'Reilly's body beneath the roots of that cursed tree. Leaving him there was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But the jungle wasn't letting us take him back. The extraction was chaos. Waist-deep surf, bullets snapping as stragglers took shots from the tree line, the desperate shove into the belly of the boat. And then we were airborne, the island shrinking into nothing but green and shadow. Russo didn't make it. He slipped away before we touched base, his fever breaking into silence. Hendricks never spoke again. His eyes saw things none of us could drag him back from. Chen, Doc, and I survived, if you want to call it that. We left pieces of ourselves on Latalo, pieces we'd never get back. The brass called it a success. Mission accomplished. The airfield destroyed weeks later in a bombing run. They pinned medals to our chests, shook our hands, told us we were heroes. But I knew better. The real enemy wasn't the Japanese. It was the jungle, the green hell that devoured us, body and soul. A place that taught us how small we truly were. And to this day, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear it. The buzz of insects, the whisper of leaves, the heartbeat of a living thing that wanted us gone, the jungle that wouldn't let us leave.